Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear students of class 2nd year, today we're going to start the objects in classes. As you know, this is a new chapter, and while we are studying object-oriented programming, only because that in previously we have studied in C programming language the procedural and structured programming. And in procedural and structured programming, what we have studied in C++, the procedural and structured programming. So in that programming, the code, the data and the actions, they are two separate entities. Whenever you are using your data and whenever you are doing actions on that data, there are two separate entities. Number one, they are separate entities. Number two, that there is no security on the data. The data is not secure when you are doing structured programming or procedure programming. So the programmer has a great concern that, okay, if we are using our data, the data must be secure, it must be locked, it must be encapsulated. So for this purpose, the new technique of the programming that emerged and now it is being used through all over the world, and that is called object-oriented programming. Shortly, it is called OOP. And you know, in this technique, it gives us a lot of facilities. The first thing that we have studied, and the first procedural programming, that actions and data, they are two separate entities, but here we have combined the data with the actions. Data and actions are combined in one module, and that modularization is called object-oriented programming. Plus, whenever we say that if a language is object-oriented programming language or it supports object-oriented programming or not. So there are four basic principles. If any programming language supports those four basic principles, it is called object-oriented programming language. And since we know that C++ is an object-oriented programming, because of these four principles, it supports number one, whenever a language supports encapsulation, polymorphism, inheritance and abstraction, so that language is called pure object-oriented language. And since the C language supports all these four basic principles, these are the four basic principles, or these are called the four pillars of object-oriented programming, and they all are supported by the C++ language. So that is why it is called pure object-oriented programming language. And plus there is another facility, and that is called data hiding. That your private data is being hid from all other programmers and functions outside of your class. So let's start how to use object-oriented programming and how we can take advantage from that object-oriented programming. Class is one of the main features of object-oriented programming. If you want to do programming in OOP or object-oriented programming, you cannot do it without classes. So class is the base for doing the object-oriented programming. And what is a class now? So class basically contains two things. It is a package of two things, and that is called member data and member function. First of all, let me write the syntax, the structure of a class, then we would elaborate this further, we will open this further. Dear students, this is the general syntax of a class. So a class always starts from the keyword class. What is class? It is a keyword. It is a reserved word. Whenever you are going to start a class, whenever you are going to make a new class, it must start from the keyword class. Then here comes the name of the class. And the name of the class can be any variable name which satisfy all the name of the variable. So here we have a class name, and class name can, for example, you can write a test class or ABC, any name you can give to the class. So there will be a class, reserved word, it must be here, and then any name you give to your class. The class starts from a braces and finish at braces, and there is a semicolon. Whenever you finish your class, it finishes with a semicolon. This is called the terminator of your class. And then inside the class, we have two main portions. One is the access specifier and member 1, the access specifier and member 2. Now let us discuss what is access specifier and what are the members of a class. Members, inside the class we have two members. One is called member data and another is called member function. So normally a class contains member data. And what is member data? The normal data we are being used in, we were using in C++ language. So that is member data. For example, we have integer data, we have float, we have double, you can use different data types which are permissible in C++ language: integer, float, double, long, character. These are the data types which we can use in a class. And what is a member function? Member function, basically they are used in a class to work upon the data. Whenever you want to utilize the data, whenever you want to use the data, whenever you want to perform some actions upon the data, then you need functions. So here we have written member 1, here we have written member 2. So basically we are pointing towards the member data and the member functions. Now what is an access specifier? Access specifier is a unique technique that is used in object-oriented programming classes that here you specify the access of the user, that who can use their data, who can even see their data, and who can work upon or who can utilize this data. So normally we have three access specifiers. These are the three access specifiers that we can use in a class. Number one is private. Normally we keep the member data as private. I'll write an example program where we will utilize all these things. But first of all, let me define these things. So, when you write the access specifier private, so the private member data or the private member function, when it is declared as a private, they can only be accessed inside the boundary of the class or inside the body of the class. Here, this is called the body of the class. This body is inside the two braces. So basically, if we declare some member data or member function is private, so they can only be used inside a class. They cannot be seen, they cannot be used, they cannot be accessed outside the class. So it means member function or member data inside the class, they can only see them and they can only access them. So whenever you want to secure your data, or whenever a programmer wants to secure his data, he keeps it private. Private means that only inside the class it is visible, only inside the class it is accessible. Now let's come towards the public. Okay, I'm just giving a definition on these things, but further it will becomes more, comes in detail and it will becomes more clear to you people. Then, dear students, we have a public access specifier. What is a public access specifier? Public, whenever you declare, normally we declare member functions as public. Whenever you declare member data or member function as public, so they can be used inside the class or they can be used outside the class. Means they are accessible everywhere. So means the functions which are not the part of your class, even then they can access, they can use your public member functions or member data. So now these are two extremes. One is private, which is private for the class and only they are visible inside the class, and there is another extreme which we call public, which can be used inside the class, which can be used outside the class. Who can use outside the class? Inside the main function or other functions which are not the part of this class, or other classes even they can access your public member data member function. They can use your public member data and member function. And the protected, that will be used in inheritance, so we will expand it inside the inheritance. Let me now write an example code, and here we will write member data member function. But dear students, one thing should be very clear to you, that what is the theme of the class? To protect data, to encapsulate it. Encapsulate means inside capsule. Whatever is inside the capsule, we cannot see this. Even that is hidden. So so normally we keep the member data as private and we keep the member function as public. So this is the basic theme of the class, that data is you want to secure your data, so keep your data as private and keep your member function as public. Another question arises and it must be asked by the students as well, that if we do not write any access specifier inside the class, so whether it will be public or private. So by default the class is private. By default the class is private. If you do not write any access specifier, so whatever you write inside the class, that will be treated as private. Okay, so I am creating a class, and the another thing that needs to be clear, that where you will write the class, because there is a main body as well, there is a main function as well. So the class must be written between the hash include and between the main body. So main body, and where you will start the hash include conio.h, hash include iostream.h. So between them you write your class. So as we discussed earlier, that it is a keyword, so you must write this. Without this, the class is not accessible, it is not permissible. So then I give the class name as test. This is the name of the class and class keyword. Then the class starts from this braces. Then I would write private. What is private? As discussed earlier, it is an access specifier. And there is a colon sign, which we call full colon. Colon sign, it indicates that it is an access specifier. Now whatever you write below the private access specifier, they will be treated as private. For example, if I write int x semicolon load y semicolon char z semicolon, we have declared three member data. This is basically data, but since it is inside the class, so they are the members of the class, and since they are the members of the class, so that is why they are called member data. So we have declared three member data: integer, float and character, and these all are written under the private, so they will be treated as private member data. Now I am writing another access specifier with colon sign at the end, and this is public. Now whatever you write here, it will be public to all member functions. I am writing a function y Okay, as we said that the member functions are the actions which we perform over the data, which we perform upon the data. So now this is a member function which is inside the class body, and they are initializing, since we are giving the initial value to the variables, so they are initializing these variables. So in other words, we can say that it is working upon this data. Now it continues, so I will continue from here, and after this I make another function y disk. Now it is a display function where we simply display these values. Now, first of all, you must notice this bracket. This is the class. We are closing the class here. The class starts from here, the class finishes here with a semicolon. And this is the start bracket of the function, this is the close bracket of the function, starts here, finish here. Your function starts from here, your function closes here. Your function starts from here, your function closes here. And this is, here the class opens, here the class closes. So it means inside the class we have private member data, inside the class we have two member functions which are public. So basically we have two member functions which are doing some actions upon the data. So again I would come towards. So students, this is an example of the class, and the previously we have written the syntax. On the same syntax we have written an example program which contains the private member data and the public member functions. So now let's move ahead. Whenever you are doing programming or object-oriented programming, it cannot be done without objects. Objects are the variables that we create for a class, and that is why, if you can see the name of the chapter, that is objects in classes. So basically, when you create a class, it does not occupy any space in the computer memory. I would repeat, when you create a class, it does not take any space in the computer's memory. Now, when one can surprise that why? Because there are three member data, and each member data that occupies, for example, different spaces, 1 MB, 2 MB, 4 MB, 8 MB. So why it is not occupying space? The class will occupy space in the computer's memory when you create an object of the class. What is the object of the class? Object are the variables of the class. When you create the variables of the class, and we can discuss this on another aspect as well. When you create a class, basically you have created a new data type. So, like we create variables for different data types. Here is a variable of integer data type. Here is a variable of float data type. Here is a variable of a character data type. So, when you create a class, you have created a new data type, and that data type basically, now you can create objects of the class or variables of the class, and it is also called instance of the class. For example, you have class is called template. For example, you have created a student class. So when that class will occupy memory when student take admission. For example, different students comes with different names: Ali, Asad, Riyaz, their father name, their addresses, etc. So these are the real world instances. These are the real world data. So when you create an object of the class, basically you have instantiate your class into the computer memory, or in simple words I would say, when you create object of the class, it introduces class in the memory. Who takes class to the memory? The object. Object basically take the copy of the class and bring it into the memory, or introduce it inside the memory. So today we will simply just see how to create object of the class, and then we inshallah in next class we will go in much detail. So the syntax of creating object is class name, and then object 1 comma we we can create objects like this, that you give the name of the class, and then if you are creating one object or more than one objects, and it finishes with a semicolon. Now let me give you an example. We have already created a class test, so I will create an object of the class obj. So now this is called object of the class, and what is this type? Test. What is test? Test is the name of the class. So if I, for example, let me finish this class, and inside this class we will create an object as well. Where we create objects, objects are created inside the main function, main body. So here we create the main function body, and now what is the name of the class? That is test, and I create an object n1 of this class. Now through this object we can call the member functions and member data of the class. I'm not going into details today for that, but simply I would say that, for example, I want to call this function, so I would call this by n1 dot get, and if I want to call another function, I will call this by n1 dot this. Finish the main function and finish the body. So basically, what is the object n1? When you create an object n1, so it creates the member data, copy. It has a copy of the member data with its values, for example 10, 3.55 and plus. Plus it has the copy of the functions as well. Y, as I told you that an object takes a copy of the class to the memory. So whenever, if you create more than one object, so there will be, if you create two objects, so there will be two copies of the class inside the memory. If you create three objects, so there will be three copies of the class inside the computer memory. So more objects, more copies inside the class. Every object takes its individual copy of the class to the memory. So this is sufficient for today. We have created a class, we have studied what is object-oriented programming, what are the basic principles of an object-oriented programming, and if you want to do object-oriented programming, it cannot be done without classes. What is inside the class? We have access specifiers, member data, member function. Normally we keep the member data as private. Normally we keep the member function as public, and then we have taken an example of the class. So that is all done from today. Inshallah, from tomorrow we will continue this topic. Thank you very much.